give them a word that's like a real word. It's got the proper English letters together in the right kind of order, like a word like, how about 𝗬𝗠? And you can tell your friend, say 𝗬𝗠. The kid goes 𝗬𝗠. Now say 𝗬𝗠. Don't say 𝑠. They should just say 𝗬, because they took the sound off the end. Anybody who can do that quick and easy wordplay is much less likely to struggle and more likely to actually have stronger reading skills. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dyslexia Discussions and More. I'm Dr. Tim Conway. I'm a neuropsychologist trained in neurorehabilitation, which means rebuilding skills after brain damage. Also trained in neurodevelopmental disorders. That's all of the learning disabilities. That includes autism, that includes language disorders, that includes ADHD, any type of developmental learning difficulty. And I'm also trained in neuroimaging, which is fMRI brain imaging. I've published studies in brain imaging as well. In fact, my actual PhD dissertation was a dyslexia study with fMRI, measuring the differences in brain activity between adults with and adults without dyslexia. So we're bringing this wealth of background to you to try to set the record straight about what is scientific and what is not. And that's why our podcast today is about dyslexia myths. We want to try to talk about the medical side, what pediatricians need to know, what parents need to know, what teachers need to know, and make sure we can separate what is really factual, true by scientific research, and what is actually myth that really is not based on science. But sadly, some of the myths are actually more commonly repeated than the actual scientific facts. So we look forward to having this conversation with you today. Doesn't matter which platform you're watching from, whether it's Facebook or whether it's YouTube or whether it's LinkedIn, you can post in questions and we can try then integrate your questions straight into the discussion today. First, let's start by talking about exactly what the definition of dyslexia is, because one of the biggest myths about dyslexia is it's really not well defined. There's lots of debate about what it really is and what the definition is. We even have groups today who are trying to write new definitions of dyslexia, like it has to be updated. And understand that many of the groups who are taking on those challenges are not the groups that actually speak to the licensed professionals who actually diagnose dyslexia. The licensed, it's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And what it means that it's a listing of all the possible diagnoses that someone could have. And it then shares with you what is the diagnosis, and it guides the professional on what the criteria are to meet the diagnosis. So in this situation, the diagnosis is a specific learning disorder with impairment in reading. And we've highlighted in yellow here as well, this piece in yellow where it says dyslexia is an alternative term used to refer to a pattern of reading difficulties characterized by problems with accurate or fluent word recognition, poor decoding, which means poor ability to sound words out, and also poor spelling. So these two diagnoses, one's called a specific learning disorder with impairment in reading, and the diagnosis of dyslexia, both have the same code, that 315.00 F81.0, and they both come from the same category, the same diagnosis. Now, the other myth that we hear a lot is people say, well, you know, they took the diagnosis of dyslexia out of the DSM-5. Well, there it is for you to see in print. It's there. It's now just been combined with the other diagnosis of specific learning disorder with impairment in reading. So there's only 3 criteria for a diagnosis of dyslexia, and you only have to meet one of the 3. It's very clear, very simple. The 3 criteria are, number 1, that blue arrow at the top here says it's a deficit in reading accuracy. You make mistakes when you read the words. You add sounds that don't belong. You leave out sounds that do belong. You switch out one word for the other. And these are not visual problems. You're just not very good at sounding out the word. The number 2 criteria is you might be really accurate, but you're really slow at reading. There's a much slower fluency, they call it, or slower reading rate. If you have a really slow reading rate, that's enough to be diagnosed with dyslexia. The bottom one is reading comprehension. Perhaps you read accurately and you read with good fluency, reasonable speed, but you actually, and many parents will say this, it's almost like it goes in one ear and out the other. The child or the teenager or even the adult doesn't easily retain and understand what they were reading. So if you have any one of those criteria, poor reading accuracy, poor reading rate, or poor reading comprehension, those are the criteria, and those are the only criteria that licensed professionals use to diagnose dyslexia. So keeping that in mind, we have a clear definition, we have clear diagnostic criteria, and for some reason, these special interest groups, that many of them are nonprofits that host annual conferences, they want people to come to their conferences, they're trying to write a new definition and get more popularity, to get more people maybe to come to the conference or something. Not quite sure what the rationale is for making up a new definition. UK just did the same thing. They actually just released the Delphi report with a new definition of dyslexia. But the diagnostic criteria by which licensed professionals who are licensed to diagnose, so let me clarify that again. Many people who do educational testing, they're licensed from the state that they live in, whether it's Florida, Georgia, Wisconsin, California, does not allow them to diagnose dyslexia. So you'll get an educational evaluation from some folks that doesn't get a diagnosis, and you may not know that person actually cannot give you a diagnosis. They're not licensed to diagnose, but their information can be useful. So for some parents, it's helpful to at least get some information about where's my child's reading skills, where are their strengths, where are their weaknesses, to try to understand a little bit more about what's going on. In other situations, parents are mystified to find out they got all this testing, but they don't have a diagnosis. And the professional may or may not explain to them they actually do not have a license to diagnose. So it's really important for parents to be very savvy consumers. And one question you might want to ask somebody is, can you diagnose dyslexia? Before you spend $500, even $300 or $3,000, make sure you're with the right professional, which is either a PhD neuropsychologist, or in some states, school psychologists are licensed to diagnose. In most states, speech pathologists are licensed to diagnose, but many others are not. So know who you're going to, know who you're talking to, and know about whether or not they're going to be able to give you the diagnosis. All right, so with that in mind, we'll remove that from the screen there, and let's talk about what some of the myths are about dyslexia. And we've got something that I'm going to throw up on the screen because this is so popular. People eat this up. They look at it all the time. It's fascinating. But let me caution you to tell you, this is not what dyslexia looks like. This is actually just showing what someone thinks dyslexia might be. And it actually is just showing how it's words moving on the page. Not sure if I can zoom in on that a little bit more, make it even bigger. Hopefully you can see that well enough. But this is a website with someone who's well-intentioned trying to show you that they think this might be what dyslexia looks like to some people. And you see the letters are moving, the words are moving. And my gosh, yeah, nobody could read this because it keeps jumping all around. But currently, in research about dyslexia, there's no evidence that this is actually what it looks like for folks who are on or struggling with dyslexia. They really don't have trouble with words moving on the page. Some kids will tell you that, some teens might have said, and it's usually more related to that they're straining so hard to try to figure out how to read the word, that strain kind of gets a little eye strain or eye difficulty. But that's a symptom secondary to the dyslexia. It's not what's causing the reading problem. So no, there's no clear evidence that says dyslexic people see words move around. But there is clear evidence that says they'll look at the word through and they might say though. Well, did the R jump off the page? No, most likely they just didn't realize they left out a sound that should be there in the word through. And that's part of the hallmark characteristics of dyslexia, is they struggle to sound words out. So that's myth number one out the window. They are not struggling to sound out words, and they're not struggling to actually work with what's happening or work with the information. So let's go to myth, or let me do it this way. I'm going to pose the statement, You think about if you think it's a myth or it's a scientific fact. I've got a bunch of lists of things going on here. One of them is dyslexia is very rare. Very few people actually have dyslexia. And I've even heard some licensed professionals say, it's so rare that I don't even bother diagnosing it. It really just doesn't happen. And others say, no, the science says it's 1 out of 5 people, which is like 20%. And other science says, no, actually, if you compare reading comprehension versus listening comprehension. Now, understand that. If your reading comprehension is low and your listening comprehension is high, there's only one explanation for that. And that is that your reading is so impaired, it's interfering with your ability to comprehend. So then we know that is another sign of dyslexia. And when they've done studies on that, what they find is it's 1 out of 3 people. So dyslexia is actually not rare. It's actually quite common. It ranges from 5% to 33%. It depends on how you define it. It depends on what cutoff criteria we use to say, hey, do you just need to have, a 12-point gap or a 20-point gap or 30-point gap? How much impairment has to be there to really meet the criteria? All right, got a great question from 𝗁𝗔 Q. And Susie, I've got this one dialed up for you. The question is, I'll leave it on there. Do dyslexic fonts help? If you go to the Annals of Dyslexia, that's a very popular dyslexia journal, or you go to scholar.google.com, and you type in dyslexia font, you'll find article after article that have tested dyslexia fonts, and time and again, they come to the same resolution. Each one keeps saying that there actually is no benefit to dyslexia fonts. It says that there's no difference in how well someone performs with dyslexia or without dyslexia. And so that then makes it more important to understand that dyslexia font really does not benefit people much, if at all. So here's an article here. This one says, and I know it might be a little bit harder to see, the title is Dyslexia Font Does Not Benefit Reading in Children with or Without Dyslexia. This is one of those Annals of Dyslexia articles. And so what that's telling us is that they did a study, they compared it in multiple groups, and I've highlighted down here at the bottom, it says, conclusion is that the dyslexia font neither benefits nor interferes with the reading process of children with or without dyslexia. So there's lots of hype about it, lots of popularity about it, but then we find out it really isn't true. It really doesn't make any difference. It might seem novel for a little bit, but when you scientifically study it, you find out there's no scientific evidence that dyslexics read better when the font is different, or when the spacing is different, or when the color is different. Same thing is true about if you put a colored page over the print to try to decrease the glare that happens. Many people report that they feel less strain when the glare is not there, but there's no clear studies that says when you put colored overlays or put colored lenses on that you automatically become a much more accurate reader. You might feel less stressed about reading, but there's no scientific evidence from peer-reviewed, high-caliber research studies that says a screen overlay or colored lenses make you a more accurate or more fluent or better comprehending reader. So we don't have evidence from that context that dyslexia is going to be boosted by a font. Susie, great question. Really important to understand. Another piece is, let me throw this question out. Is dyslexia outgrown? At some point in time, it's gone. Your brain is matured. In fact, that's a common thing that parents will hear from educators who don't really quite understand the brain science of dyslexia. It even happened to me. My own school told me after my daughter was age 7, and at the end of first grade, she could not read. They said, listen, it clicks at different ages for some kids. For some kids, reading clicks early. For other kids, reading clicks late. It just has not clicked yet for your daughter. And the answer was, okay, well, let me explain something to you, because I'm a brain scientist of extensive training, decades of training on children and adults and teens and college kids, imaging training, rehab training, treatment training. I can guarantee you there is not a single neuroanatomy atlas on dyslexia that has any piece of the brain called the click. Also, there's no scientific textbooks or articles that talk about how the brain functions, how the neuropsychology of the brain, which is how the brain and behavior go together. In neuropsychology, there's no part of brain function we call clicking. So kindly, respectfully, I explain to the educators that what they're really telling me is they don't know why my daughter can't read, and they don't know what to do about it, and they're hoping this next year it'll get better. The research actually says the opposite. Research says if you have a small gap in reading skills at age 7, and it's enough that you're not really going to be past the grade 2, guess what happens when you get to grade 2 and they do more of the same efforts or the same program? The gap just gets bigger. And grade 3, the gap gets bigger. And so until we use a evidence-based, tested, proven effective dyslexia empowerment program, you don't expect dyslexia to get better as you get older. Now, that said, know that many people with dyslexia, their brain, this part back here, is for a large percentage of dyslexics, it's working pretty well. And this part over here is too, a little bit back behind the ear. They're memorizing lots of words. So clearly over time, if you memorize more and more and more words, you might feel like your reading's getting easier because you're not struggling as much with so many words. But that really doesn't mean that you have outgrown your dyslexia. Here's one way you can tell with adults. There's one skill set with adults that never really goes away, and that is the skill set of what happens when you actually are asking adults to spell. If you ask adults to spell and they still struggle to spell, those are most likely adults who still have dyslexia. And because of their dyslexia and because of the spelling difficulties, we know that they've really just done a better job at memorizing more and more words. So no, actually, that's a myth. You do not outgrow dyslexia. Age doesn't change the brain structure. Age doesn't give you new brain function, but age gives you age. And hopefully with each year of more practice, more experience, you get more experiences, then you'll have time where things begin to build over time. All right, let's take another statement. Let's say audiobooks and extra time are the best solutions for dyslexia. Myth or fact? Think about that for a minute. And many people are real passionate about this topic. Many people will really passionately say, listening to books is reading. That's just fine. It needs to be reading. And consider what we call it ear reading. I said, well, I'm a brain scientist, and there's nothing in our training that listening to books is called reading. Reading is a process of converting visual symbols to spoken words. That's the only definition of reading. Can you get information from audiobooks? Yes, you can. Is it a form of conveying information? Yes, it is. Could audiobooks help people with dyslexia who are not getting stronger reading skills learn their content, learn their social studies class, listen to the book that the class is reading? 100%, that's possible. And so audiobooks can be an accommodation to help you learn content, but audiobooks themselves are not a solution for dyslexia because they don't change your reading skills. And yet we do have peer-reviewed systems that show we can change reading skills. And Reese asks this really important question, or I'm sorry, I don't know if it's Reese Jordan or Jordan Reese. That's what's hard about these kind of posts to me. Can it be reversed? Well, I think what Reese is asking is, can you change reading skills over time? And the answer is yes, 100%. We have decades of research showing at 5 years old, at 10 years old, at 55 years old, we can take your weaker reading skills and make them stronger. But the best way for that to happen is we have to use programs that are called evidence-based reading programs. These means the program has been tested scientifically and proven to be effective. Personally, I spent 10 years doing a more severe than dyslexia, well, I should say treating a more severe than dyslexia condition. Believe it or not, there's a type of reading problem that's way more severe than dyslexia. And it's not due to genetics. Dyslexia, I jokingly tell kids or 15-year-olds who are frustrated with their reading problems, or 35 and 25-year-olds who also are frustrated with their reading problems, there's one thing that you can do about your dyslexia, and that's just blame your mom and dad. It's genetic. It runs in families. My children get to blame me. It runs in my family. I will blame my father. He had dyslexia too. He could probably blame his father. He might have had dyslexia as well. It's just the family tree that we see coming down, that family tree with dyslexia. But the point is, but what can we do about it? Can we change those skills? So if you have a brain injury, like the blood supply gets cut off, your artery gets a clog in it, the blood's not going up to the brain, within a few hours, the brain tissue will die. And that might have brain tissue that dies here on the left side, and this is the reading side of the brain for the majority of people. And so if the brain tissue dies, you might lose your reading skills. And in fact, here's the stats. 800,000 people in the US every year have a stroke. Of the ones who survive, those are the lucky ones, 40,000 people every year in the US lose a degree of their reading skills, spelling skills, or even their speaking skills. And so they don't have dyslexia because it's not genetic. It's an acquired problem. They acquired it after a brain injury. So instead of putting the dys on it, we put an A on it. It's called alexia. And that stands for an acquired reading problem. In 10 years of research, we have shown that we're about 70% successful at strengthening, making stronger those reading skills, even when there's brain damage. So Reese, good news is that's 1,000 times harder to help than somebody who has dyslexia, because there's no brain damage in somebody who has dyslexia. A better way to conceptualize it is the brain wiring on the left side of the brain for someone with dyslexia is not communicating as efficiently. But guess what? The brain can change the wiring. It never stops. You have lifelong ability to change the wiring, which means you can learn new skills all the time. Doesn't matter if you're 7 or 77, your brain can learn new skills. So that's the good news is there's never a time when we actually can't strengthen the brain's functioning of literacy skills. Now, unfortunately, most adults who have had dyslexia their whole life have been led to believe my brain's different, it works different, it can't be changed. But the problem is all of the efforts that they've received from this school or that school or this class were actually methods that have never been proven to be successful. So it's kind of like saying you can try vitamin C or an herbal compress or a special herbal tea to treat strep throat, but there's no science that says those have any help for strep throat. But keep trying them, and you might just come to believe that your body can never really get rid of the bacteria that causes strep throat because nothing you've tried has gotten rid of your strep throat. Or you can try a evidence-based treatment that we call an antibiotic that more than 70 years ago was shown to be highly effective to treat strep throat, and that's called penicillin. So unfortunately, many people with dyslexia don't understand that they've just been they've just unfortunately never gotten an intervention or a treatment program that actually was ever proven to work. And so in education, unlike healthcare, there's no requirement that the method used to teach you reading has to have any proof that it works. Any school can buy any program and give it to you and hope it might help. And there's no requirement that it has to have been tested, scientifically tested. Compare program A with program B and compare the two together, see which one's most effective. Throw away the other one, stay with the effective one. And then program B gets compared with program C, which is more effective. Oh, program C is more effective now. Throw out program B. And we keep trying to get the more and more effective programs. That doesn't happen in education. That's a whole different podcast. We won't go into that today. But know that many adults who've been misled to think they've never been able to get rid of their dyslexia is because of their brain. It's actually because you've never really had an intervention that was ever tested and proven to be highly effective. So Reese, good news. It can happen and happen at any ages. Now we have another podcast called Dyslexia Success Stories. It's also hosted on the @Now Programs Online. And that's just that @ @Now Programs Online on YouTube channel. And there's about 20 different podcasts there of different people of all ages. I think the oldest person we have on there right now is 53. And at age 53, Mr. Jones joined our intervention program, which is called Now Programs. And we rebuilt his reading and spelling skills at age 53. He's a really bright guy. He's an IT professional. He owns patents that he has created and patented technology ideas. Very smart. And that's a really key thing to understand too. Dyslexia has no connection to IQ. In fact, I have a dyslexia school. It's a free school. Nobody pays a dime to go to this school. And it's named the Einstein School. Why do we call it the Einstein School? Well, of course, because no, we don't know if Albert Einstein had dyslexia. That's a big debate. We named it the Einstein School because everyone knows that guy was pretty smart. And we want kids who come to my school for dyslexia to know that dyslexia has no connection to your IQ. That is a common myth as well. It's not as common anymore, thank goodness. Many teachers now understand, and in the UK, they might call them thick, or might call them slow, or call them dense. And in the States, we might call them unintelligent, not very smart, and sadly, a word even like stupid. Those are all incorrect. And so we know that IQ has no connection to dyslexia. So that's why my school is called the Einstein School in Gainesville, Florida. It's there to help kids get services and boost up those skills. All right, let's jump to another one. How about this statement? Let's put this up on the screen. How about we have one that says many dyslexics, they're dyslexic individuals excel in creativity, problem solving, and the big picture thinking. It's the bottom of section 5. It's one of my list of facts of myth versus facts. So we're going to throw that one up there and see, what do you think this one is? Is this one a myth or is this a fact? Many dyslexic individuals excel in creativity, problem solving, and big picture thinking. Myth, fact. Myth. There's been several studies that have compared dyslexics to non-dyslexics to see, do dyslexics have an innately wired, more creative brain center? And the answer is no. On creativity measures and creativity tests, typical readers and dyslexics show the same creativity abilities. It's a spectrum. Some people have more creativity, some have less. When you're a reader, when you're a dyslexic and you struggle to read, some people have more, some people have less. And so what we do know is dyslexics are always engaged in trying to work around their dyslexia. So they do have to do a lot more creative pursuits. They have to expend a lot more energy to get the work done they're trying to get done. And they have to use more novel ideas to do it, but it doesn't actually give them a inherent better ability to be creative than somebody who's not dyslexic. One fact that many people have been told over and again, it's not 100% accurate. It comes from a very limited source of data. Let me put it this way, that 35% of CEOs or 35% of business people are dyslexic. And they're like, see, they're very creative. I said, you're missing the other side of that equation. That means 65% of them are not dyslexic. And so if they're not dyslexic and they're still CEOs, then we know they've got creativity too. And they're able to run companies and have reading skills. What many dyslexics will tell us is, I could think with the information I knew, but now that I can read and I've improved my reading skills, I have more information I can think with. I can think from pictures, which is more of the right hemisphere system, or I can think from words, which is more of the left hemisphere part of the brain. And when you have both strong, you now have more thinking ability with words and pictures. Pictures can help you think of more words, or words can help you think of more pictures. And you can use both systems together. So know that if you're dyslexic, keep using your creativity. You're building it. You're making it stronger. It wasn't genetically endowed. You did it. You built it. Just like if you are a trumpet player and you're dyslexic and you become super skilled at a trumpet playing, you didn't have genetic skills to be a trumpet player. You built them. You practiced hours after hours per day, week after week, month after month. And you might be Wynton Marsalis, and you're one of the most professionally trained, super accomplished trumpet players. It wasn't genetic endowment that gave it to you. It was your hard work. Your persistence paid off. All right, let's jump to another one. How about dyslexia affects reading skills, spelling skills, fluency, and comprehension? It affects all of those things. Do you think that one is a myth or a fact? What is really dyslexia affecting? Is it affecting reading and spelling and fluency and comprehension, or some mixture of all the above? Myth or fact? It's actually scientific fact. This is part of the diagnostic criteria. You can have reading problems and spelling, or just reading by itself. You can have fluency problems and you're dyslexic. You can have reading comprehension problems and you're dyslexic. And as Susie says, and you might have all of them, and that is really difficult because it makes it tough. That's not easy to do. And Reese, you're spot on again. It's a fact. Dyslexia can be any or all of those pieces. So that is some part of what is part of the definition of dyslexia. And that's what we just talked about this piece here. We said the DSM-5 is how we diagnose dyslexia in the US. It could be an accuracy problem or a fluency rate problem or a comprehension problem or all of the above or two of the above. If you have even one of these three, you meet the criteria to be diagnosed with dyslexia. All right, let's throw up another one. How about dyslexia can impact mathematical abilities and writing skills? Is that dyslexia? And I think we already gave away the answer, because you see in this caption here, this funny word dyscalculia, or this funny word dysgraphia. That's because math problems is not part of the definition of dyslexia. This is a myth. But math problems are dyscalculia. Dyslexia is not writing problems. It's not written composition problems. It's not paragraph writing problems. So that's not dyslexia. But can dyslexia impact them is actually factual true, yes. So dyslexia is not the same as dyscalculia. Dyslexia is not the same as dysgraphia. Those are separate diagnoses. They have separate criteria. But certainly if you have reading problems and you get a math word problem and you misread the word problem, you're probably not going to do the math right. So certainly dyslexia can change your ability to do some parts of math. Certainly if you have trouble reading and you have trouble spelling, and you have trouble retrieving words and thinking of words, it might make it harder to organize your thoughts to actually do writing and compose sentences, compose paragraphs, or just write information. So dyslexia can impact dysgraphia, but dyslexia and dysgraphia are not the same thing. All right, we're going to keep on punching through this list because, boy, there's a lot of them. Here's one that came on early on, and that was boys have dyslexia more often than girls, or men have dyslexia more often than women. And that's number 11 on our big list. And we've got a giant list we're looking at here today. And gosh, how many did we put in here so far? I think we put about 40 myths in there and about 40 facts to draw from today. But number 11 says boys have dyslexia more than girls, or only boys have dyslexia. And we used to believe it was 3 to 1. 3 boys have dyslexia for every 1 girl that has dyslexia. And then somebody did something unique. They studied it. And they actually looked at the frequency of diagnoses across a large sample of children. This was in the Connecticut longitudinal studies. And that was carried out by the Shawitzes from Yale, very prominent husband-wife physician duo. And what they found was, actually, it's not 3 to 1. It's 1.2 to 1. And so 1.2 to 1 is not going to be much difference. That basically means there's about just as many boys as girls, or men as women, who have dyslexia. It doesn't discriminate among the genders. Just like dyslexia doesn't discriminate among the cultures, or among the societies, or among the countries. Dyslexia does not discriminate among the IQ range. You can be high IQ and have dyslexia. You can be lower IQ and have dyslexia. Dyslexia doesn't discriminate against religions. It doesn't care what religion you have. You're just as likely to have dyslexia. So our answer there is only boys or mostly boys. That's a myth. And we have solid scientific data that helps prove it and tease it apart. Let's go on with another one. Let's go with phonics-based instruction is enough to empower or fix dyslexia. You just need some good phonics lessons, and that's going to take care of it. Well, think about this. Phonics, by definition, means letters, the written letters, going down to the sounds. Learning what AI says in words. What does PH say in words? Learning word families, words that end in OUS, or words that begin with PRE, or words that have roots in them too. They have the root ped, and ped means foot. And so that's why the word pedal is what you do, put your foot onto a bike to move the thing. It's called a pedal because ped means foot. And what we find out is if you just do phonics by itself, and Reese, you're spot on again. She is better buy a lottery ticket tonight, Reese. You're nailing all the answers. It is a myth. Phonics programs by themselves are not enough to fully empower dyslexia, because dyslexia is not a phonics deficit. Dyslexia will affect your ability to learn phonics, but dyslexia's hallmark deficit, the number one predictor, has nothing to do with letters. If you want to tell mom or dad, or grandma and grandpa, or teacher, or auntie. If you want to tell if your 4-year-old is at high risk or low risk for dyslexia, you do one thing. It's very simple. You say a word like bus, and ask the child to say bus. And then you say to them now, okay, now repeat bus, but don't say the b sound. The 4-year-old who can quickly just go us, because they realize there's b at the beginning, they took it away, there's 2 sounds left, they put them together, and they said the word us. Kids who can do that at age 4, that's a manipulation of speech sounds and words. That is the #1 predictor of whether you're going to have strong reading skills or weak reading skills. The scientific name for that is phoneme elision. Phoneme just means speech sound. B is a speech sound. It's a phoneme. Is a speech sound. It's a phoneme. S is a speech sound. It's also a phoneme. Not phone me, phoneme. And so phoneme elision means hold on to a word that's got 3 sounds mashed together, because bus, the sounds are all smashed together. There's no space between them. Your ear and your brain has to piece them apart to figure out where is the b. Oh, it's the first one. And so they take the b sound away, and then you've got the they got the and the s left, and you put them together, you got us, because you took out the b. Now, kids who can do that at age 4 are much more likely not to struggle to read and spell. So it's our #1 early identifier is this phoneme elision activity. You can say, gosh, how about something like clap? And the kid can say clap. And you can say, now say clap. Don't say the ol sound. And the kid should say cap. Or if you really want to test it, and you might want to do this with your spouse just for fun, or with your sibling just for fun, don't give them a real word. Give them a word that's like a real word. It's got the proper English letters together in the right kind of order, like a word like, how about voos? And you can tell your friend, say voos. The kid goes voos. Now say voos. Don't say s. They should just say voo, because they took the sound off the end. Anybody who can do that quick and easy wordplay is much less likely to struggle and more likely to actually have stronger reading skills. So phonics is not enough. Phonics will only give you some archaic formulaic ideas of how to begin to sound out words. Usually phonics doesn't change reading fluency. Usually phonics does not change spelling. Usually phonics does not change verbal speaking skills and language input skills. Whereas other programs, like one that my company has built called Now Foundations for Speech, Language, Reading, and Spelling, has a developmental name because nowprograms.com offers that service online, webcam to webcam, to adults, to kids, to children all over the world. And when we do this program, that Now Foundations program, it changes speech processing first. It goes to letters later on, and phonics comes even later after that. And when we do that, we change multiple skills at the same time. And so there's a bigger difference between a developmental speech processing, we call it speech before print program, versus the phonics programs, which are the reverse. They're up here at print, and then they drop down to the speech sounds. Letter to sound, letter to sound. Any program that shows letters right away is not a speech to print program. Unfortunately, some authors who've made up new phonics programs are saying mine is a speech to print program because they think if you say the sound and letter together, it's speech to print. They've misunderstood the diagnostic and the descriptive discussion of what that means. Speech to print means you practice the sounds first with no letters, and you get much, much stronger at perceiving sounds, saying sounds, blending sounds, and then the things come together. And yet, Susie raises an interesting question. There's a program called EBLI. It stands for Evidence-Based Language Instruction. It calls itself a speech-to-print program. It's actually not, because from the very first lessons, they start showing letters. That means it's actually a phonics program. They talk about sounds and they use sounds. That's good. But as soon as you introduce letters, you're no longer working on speech. You're now working on print. The other question that comes up with that program, Susie, is when somebody puts the name evidence-based in the title of the program, that should mean it has peer-reviewed randomized controlled trial studies. In this case, EBLI has a peer-reviewed, it has a randomized controlled trial study, but then you should ask for the outcomes. The outcomes of that study showed it wasn't any more effective than regular classroom instruction. So to have the study, but not to have any results and show that it's a strong, effective program means then why would you do it? If there's no proof that it works and works well, you're just guessing. And kids and parents deserve better than that. You need to have a program that's been tested by randomized controlled trials and has proof of strong effectiveness. I have a TED Talk on that. If you go Google how to mix oil and water, Dr. Conway, dyslexia, or how to mix oil and water, TED Talk, Dr. Conway, my TED Talk will come up. And in that TED Talk, you'll see how we explain decades of research we did first. We brought you this nowprograms.com service years later. You test it first, you prove it works first, and then you create the product. That's what we did, and that's what should happen for everybody. All right, how about another good one, which is vision therapy. Vision therapy, because dyslexia uses the eyes, vision therapy is going to actually change your reading skills. Myth, fact, which one do you think it is? Is dyslexia a vision problem? Would vision therapy change your reading accuracy? Seems logical. You have to use your eyes to read. Maybe a test shows in vision therapy that you're struggling to actually keep focus on where the word is, keep focus on, the word you're reading, your eyes are skipping around. But Reese is on again. Vision therapy, and Trey's there as well, that's a myth. Vision therapy does not actually change reading skills. Everybody's got this one. You're spot on, folks. It actually is a myth. And so Reese is right. Vision therapy isn't effective because dyslexia is not a vision problem. It's a brain issue, but it's not the visual part of the brain that's the problem. It's the language, auditory, phonological processing part of the brain. We know that on fMRI brain imaging studies, you compare the brain activity of somebody who has dyslexia with somebody who does not have dyslexia, what you're going to see is you're going to see more activity on the left side of the brain for the person with good reading skills. You'll see more activity on the right side of the brain for the person who has weak reading skills. And some people misinterpret that to say, yeah, their brain is wired differently, that's why they can't read. Well, think of it this way. If you can't read, would we expect your brain to have the same or different reading skills? And so here's a way to look at that. Here's two brains. The one on the top is a child who doesn't have reading problems. This child has typical reading skills. And we see the label at the top of the brain. It's kind of confusing, but on the right side of the screen, it says left hemisphere. That means there's more activity on the left side of the brain for the kid who's a strong reader. And that same kid's brain is on the other side, labeled right hemisphere. That's this right side of the brain. They have less activity. Down below is the brain of a child who has reading problems. And what do we see? We see more activity on the right and less activity on the left. It's the opposite. No, their brain's not backwards. No, the brain's not reversed. It's just showing that because they don't know how to read well, the left side's not doing much of the work. The right side's trying to help out, but the right side really is not designed to be the reading part of our brain. So the misconception is the dyslexic's brain is hardwired differently. An alternative explanation is if you haven't learned to read, why would we expect your brain activity to look like somebody who has learned to read? So then the posing question is, all right, then what happens if we put somebody in intervention? And what happens if we actually change their reading skills? Does it actually have any impact on the brain activity? Guess what? Somebody studied it. So here's what it looks like. You have somebody and we actually put them in a treatment program that changes their reading skills. This is child number 3 on the left side, these top 2 on the left. The top 2 on the right is child number 4. Both of them show more activity on the right side and less activity on the left. And both of these kids have dyslexia. Down below, it's the same 2 kids. The left side with the kid below it is the left side of the same brain. This top picture on the left is a kid who has reading problems. And the bottom picture is the same kid after we've actually strengthened their phonological processing with a program like nowprograms.com. And we've strengthened their ability to sound out words accurately. And we strengthened their ability to actually read and smoothly, fluently read words. Now we see the brain activity on the left of that brain looking just like the kid who does not have reading problems. And the same thing happened to child number 4. The activity pattern on the left got more focused on the left side and larger. when they actually had stronger reading skills. So this shows us that actually we can change the brain's processing. And yeah, Trey's right. He knew it. We got to get in there and train that brain, give it the right teaching, the right practice, not the tinted eyeglasses, not just, having them, use their finger to point to the words, but actually using a program that's been tested and proven to change the phonological skills, change the reading skills, change the spelling skills. Gosh, there's so many of these things to cover. I'm not going to get them all done. Well, guess what? We'll post these up on our Facebook page. If you look at one of our Facebook groups, is called Dyslexia Science for Parents. Ask a Brain Scientist. We post content up there, post Facebook information on that private Facebook group. We can also post it on our LinkedIn page and show you, here's all the list of myths that we've pulled together to date, and here's all the list of facts. And we'll also attach them to our YouTube channel when we actually put this YouTube recording on the YouTube channel, so you can see them there. But know that the last one for the day, because we're already almost at 46 minutes, we find a really good one, the side. Is it myth or is it fact? How about, let's go with this one. Dyslexia is a spectrum disorder with a varying of severity. Dyslexia Science for Parents, Ask a Brain Scientist, is our Facebook group. That's a private group that I put comments on all the time. And I'll just write the name here, Dyslexia Science, Ask a Brain. Oh, he beat me to it. Thank you there, moderator. That's our private Facebook group you can join. Or there's another one you can join too, which is called Now Programs, Advice, Support, and Praise. You don't really talk to me on that one as much as you talk to parents whose kids have already gone through nowprograms.com, or you talk to adults who've already empowered their dyslexia, or you talk to teenagers and you hear from their parents how their child doesn't struggle anymore and they're in regular education and progressing and doing better and better. These are two private Facebook groups. We keep them private because people are sharing confidential information. They don't really want it blasted all over the Facebook. But you can then ask questions and know that we'll try to keep that content in those groups. So the question is, to end the night, is dyslexia a spectrum with a varying degree of severity? Is it really mild, moderate, severe? Or does everyone have severe deficits who have dyslexia? Or no one really has severe deficits. Dyslexia is always just mild, not a problem at all. And we lost it. It popped up and disappeared. But we're going to get that one. Is it a spectrum disorder, or does it have varying severity? Fact or myth? Can there be mild impairments, moderate impairments, and severe impairments of dyslexia? Or is all dyslexia at one level? Reese is saying it's the first, that it can be mild, moderate, severe. And the answer is Reese is going to buy a lottery ticket tonight. She's nailing everything when I ask. She's got all the facts correct. Yes, you can have a small, minor degree of dyslexia. You can have a moderate degree of dyslexia, and you can have a severe degree of dyslexia. And in the testing that we use as a neuropsychologist or as a speech pathologist, we'll see how much gap is there. Are you reading at the 5th percentile, or are you reading at the 55th percentile? And if you're reading at the 5th, 1st, or 3rd percentile, you are really quite impaired. But the good news is it's not impossible. Those skills can be changed. Go to our other podcast, see that Dyslexia Success Stories podcast. It's on the same YouTube channel as this one is, and watch about 20 different people tell you how much we changed their dyslexia. Go to other things and ask there as well. Susie's got one last question. I can't pass this one up. Are there different types of dyslexia? We know that the primary type of dyslexia is they struggle to sound words out. But some kids also struggle to memorize sight words, and that's more of a visual memory issue. There's some preliminary data saying that we might have subtypes, but most of the research says we're not really good at teasing them apart. So right now, the diagnosis, that DSM-5, this book here, there are not subtypes in this book. There's only one type of dyslexia, and it's dyslexia due to reading accuracy or reading speed or reading comprehension. And it all goes under the same title of dyslexia. So with more research, with more data, with more science, we hope that we'll have more information about how do we pick up on kids who have the poor skills of sounding words out, but they also have poor skills at memorizing words that you can't sound out. Yacht, though, through, that puts more demand on the visual memory system. And how do we pick up that earlier, and how do we strengthen that system earlier? Because the more easy we can identify, the sooner we identify, and the sooner we measure effective interventions, then the more that we can actually make things happen. Trey says he learned today that he's got dyscalculia and dysgraphia. His math skills are basically non-existent, and his handwriting is worse than a physician's. Maybe Trey's not a doctor. And it's gotten worse since I'm always typing now and not writing as much. So yeah, Trey, good news is find those diagnoses, and then we can do something about it. We know how to change dyslexia. We know how to empower dyscalculia. We know how to empower dysgraphia. There's lots of different ways to do it. Post questions on our Facebook groups. Happy to answer it. Go to that Now Programs Advice, Support, and Praise Facebook group, and you can talk to parents and kids who are actually already done it themselves. They can tell you what's changed, what's not changed, how much stronger those skills have gotten. And I'll throw up a few quick slides. Here's a slide of a child who had an IQ of 128, and the blue bars are where their skills were before intervention, and the green bars are where their skills are today. These are all visual motor skills that we use OT to change. These are their language skills, poor phonological skills, really tiny blue bars on the left side, some language strengths in the middle. But all the green bars show where the skills now, and they're getting closer to the person's IQ. And lastly, academic skills. There are lots of low bars that are blue, but the good news is this only took us about 4 to 5 months, and we're able to change those skills. And this kid's skills are getting closer and closer to his IQ. That's what real science helps us do, helps us change the skills, empower the brain, and build more strengths. Everyone, I want to thank you for your questions. Thank you for joining today. Thank you for communicating with us. And thank you, Reese, for the praise. Yeah, we've worked really hard to build this science, be able to change these skills. We do it in the clinics. That's themorriscenter.com. That's our medical high-powered team clinics. We do it online. We have a wide range of price points. We empower kids for free in our charter school in Gainesville, Florida. And at the bottom of the screen, we got a new thing available to moms and dads with 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, and that is Lip Letter Land. Go to the Apple Store in a month, go to the Android Play Store or the Epic Games Android Store, and you're going to see Lip Letter Land available on Android. Today, it's just available on iOS, Apple, but that is our new app for 3 to 6-year-olds that can help prevent them from having struggles with reading or spelling. Even if you don't worry about your child having reading or spelling problems, then you know we can actually change those skills. And our lovely mom, Miss Amanda, jumped in and says, this program changed her son's life. And a great photo of her and her boy there. We boosted his reading skills, boosted his spelling skills, and now he can go to regular school and excel and just have a regular life with kids who don't struggle to read and spell. Trey, thank you for the praise. Everyone, thanks for joining us. Come again in 2 weeks. We'll do another dyslexia discussion. We'll have another hot topic. And next week on Friday, we will be live streaming another dyslexia success story. We've been doing this for 39 years. Me personally, 39 years of this work, almost my 40th year coming up. And our goal is to make these services more readily available. And you cannot pass up the expense cost of Lip Letter Land. It's $6.99 a month. Or if you purchase the annual subscription, you're going to get it for $50 for the year. So basically, it's only going to be about, what is that? $4 a month? Yeah, about $4 a month. You can't beat that. Your kid is worth $4 a month. If they're 3, 4, 5, and 6, play this app with them, engage in this app together. You will boost their chances of not struggling to read and spell. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks for more dyslexia discussions, and next week for dyslexia success stories. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.